And boom, we are live. Welcome, folks, to the American Movie Podcast. If you've never been here before, welcome aboard. I go through movies, news, documentaries, and I do book reviews. And today, I'm going over the crazy book, Secrecy World. It is inside the Panama Papers, illicit money networks, and the global elite. So we'll put this up right meow and right meow. Okay, so if you're listening to the podcast, I was just holding the book up and getting it inside the frame. But so this book is written by Jake Bernstein, and it was a winner of the Pulitzer Prize, and it is insane. This is an insane book. And if you don't know what the Panama Papers are, the Panama Papers is a leak of several hundred thousands of papers and documents that lead to money networks that were created for tax aversion. And there's a difference between, I guess, tax aversion and tax evasion, because this one's legal. So there's so many countless loopholes that large companies that are basically controlled by wealthy individuals, but yeah, so it's hidden, and they avoid a whole bunch of taxes and charges so they can actually hold on to the large acquisition of wealth. So they do this, and they create anonymity, and they create several layers in between themselves and these assets. So this was insane. So there's also a video or a movie on Netflix called The Laundromat that this was actually based on. So if you don't want to listen to the book, watch the show and you'll get insight into how crazy this global class is. So they say it's 15 millionaires in 200 countries, but I believe it's more than that. But they actually acquired, due to these Panama Papers, $700 million in tax avoidance. And that's just like a sliver, because there's so many layers and there were so many people hidden in it. You don't really know who was all within this network of this company called Mossack Fonseca. And that's two people, and they created basically tax havens within the British Virgin Islands, because they based it off of Delaware. And Delaware created these tax havens, or these tax incentives, because they were trying to get people from New Jersey and New York. So they were allowing these, way back in the day, in the, I think, 19th century, they set up these tax havens or tax incentives for commerce and everybody to move into Delaware, or at least set up their companies there, because they do get like annual fees. So they do get commerce from this. And that was part of the problem within the British Virgin Islands, because people did catch wind of this and they actually put a halt to it. And the British Virgin Islands controlled by Britain. So it's like, or the UK. So it's like, how are people going to actually have money now in the British Virgin Islands? Because it was such a humongous thing of commerce, and there was this influx of money every time there were transactions, or there was a creation of companies such as LLCs. So they based it off Delaware. It was created in Delaware, and I think there's 250,000 companies on one street in Delaware, because you only need a PO box. You need an address, and you need, I believe, just papers of inquiry, or papers of, or documentation that you are acknowledged by the state to conduct enterprise. So that's all you need. And then this firm, lawyers, who I believe were based, who got away from the SS. I'm pretty sure this guy worked for the SS in the time. I'm pretty sure that was, because the book starts off with kind of his background, and he started with the SS, and then he fled from France. He got captured from France, and then gave up a lot of people and got his signature Nazi tattoo on his arm removed, and there's like the scar there and all kinds of stuff. So if you want to know more about just the background, like, it starts with Mossack and Fonseca, but then it gets into the good stuff where it's like how the global elite hide all of their stuff and get their assets in offshore accounts, or like how they actually get their money, like use their money, because it's no good if you can avoid taxes and it just sits there. So one thing that they actually do is that first they create paper trails. So like they'll make documents where they'll either sell stuff for a loss or sell an asset to another company for a loss, and then that company will acquire it, and then they can actually tax right off that loss. and they own both companies, but they don't, because there's so much or there's so much guarding and anonymity between these things, because Mossack Fonseca creates these just intricate networks that are hidden, and you can't really, and they have operators and director of operators. So they hired people like that are just in the office, and they were overseeing thousands and thousands of companies as the head of directors, because they were the actual operators, not the person who came to the firm to actually hide their assets or avoid taxes. So how do you get your assets that you've hidden in the company? Well, you can sell them or lease them. So the company can lease them to you, or lease them to a company that you own, and then you can use them. Or they also create like paper trails where they bid on stocks, but then they bid the opposite. So like they buy a bunch of stocks, and then they also sell a bunch of stocks at the exact same time. So it cancels each other out. So you don't lose anything, but on paper, there is this documentation to see that it's actually conducting exchanges, basically. So this was insane. There's a lot of Donald Trump in here too. Like at the very end, there's connection between so many Russian oligarchs, basically. He was actually quoted, I think Variety or Newsweek, one of these two. It's in the book. This is all allegedly according to the book, by the way. And so he was like, yeah, almost all the oligarchs were there. And there's several people, like he bought or he sold rather to a Russian oligarch a mansion, and he bought it for $42 million. And then this oligarch bought it for $100 million a few years later. So I don't know if there's no possible way that it had doubled in its market value. It was more of an exchange. And then the guy shortly leveled the mansion anyways. So it's like, there's just so much. And that's also part of like why real estate prices are rising so much, because there's only a certain way people can actually shield their wealth and buy it. And so you get to see New York, like real estate skyrocket, and then the coasts and all this stuff. So that was part of it. And they go into like the sheer amount of luxury and wealth that these people operate on. Donald Trump was also part of this. So it was like, this guy got this completely custom yacht, and it was $82 million at the time, basically $250 million at our time right now. And it had like a surgeon. It had everything. It had a disco. It had a full, restaurants, everything. Like it had its own surgeon and its own staff and everything like that. So it was basically a little itty bitty aircraft carrier. So it could just go around. It had X amount of gallons of gasoline. So it could go pretty much travel, I think, thousands and thousands of miles without porting anywhere. And Donald Trump bought it. He just bought it. So like, it's unfathomable the day-to-day operating of how people conduct themselves when they're just extremely wealthy. They have no comprehensive outlook on the real world or how other people are operating. Like it's just like people day to day go to 9 to 5. It's totally different than how these people who have these super yachts or whatever, or golden elaborate palaces that look like a sultan lives in, aka Donald Trump's, penthouse in New York. But it's just like, there's no possible way this person knows what's going on in real day to day. Like there's just no way. And it's like, it's sickening to see that these people are doing this, but it's legal basically. Barack Obama came on, and he said, hey, a lot of these folks are not paying taxes and the middle class is getting squeezed because of this. And it's slowly, it's just getting shot to shit, basically. And it's like, yeah, these people are doing it, and they put it in tax havens and they just shield it. And it's kind of legal. But luckily, a whistleblower inside Mossack Fonseca leaked out these Panama Papers. And so you got to see some of the people get some type of ramifications from this. But dude, it's an elaborate book. It's deep. And so there's a few things that I noticed with it. So like there's several companies that I did not recognize, or like, let's see, like just Russian names or stuff like that. So like you kind of check out, like right when you read it, you're like, you can't really put a bead on what it means or anything like that. 'Cause it's just like, all right, so I can't really categorize this at all. So that was one thing that was, I've had like just like distracting. But besides that, it's an incredible book, dude. And it's like, so how I was trying to wrap my head around on how complex it would be. It's like, I don't know if you ever played, there's a video game or a computer game where you had a light source, okay? And a light source pointed at a mirror, and then that was reflected to another mirror. And then that light source was reflected to another mirror. And you had to create, and it created this well-lit room. So like so how I pictured the intricacy of these documents and these companies that are hidden and woven is like if you have all these light sources and they're directed in every which way, and then if you break one mirror, you actually can look inside that mirror, and then there's a whole similar room of other mirrors inside of that one. So it's like just this weird layer of secrecy and anonymity. So like you can never find the light source, but it just goes into the mirror, and then there's more rooms of mirrors, and if you break every other mirror, there's more rooms of mirrors with light sources pointed everywhere. So it's so complex and elaborate that there's no possible way to decipher it. But they did catch a lot of people, and they did get fined at least. So it's like, I guess, but this is still going on. There's always tax havens, and there's always incentives and kickbacks and all kinds of stuff. So it's just like, it's a really cool book. So I highly recommend you check this out. It is Secrecy World. And yeah, that's all. Let me know if you want any more information about it. This is insane. I always heard about the Panama Papers, and I kind of knew what it was, but I have a firmer grasp on what actually happened within it. So check the book out. I'll raise the cover one more time. Secrecy World, Jake Bernstein. You wrote an incredible book. So until next time, that was Secrecy World. Matthew Benjamin with the American Movie Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to share. It really helps the podcast. And if you want to start your own podcast, you can get down in the description, and there is a course down below. It's Podcast Publisher Pro. Check it out. And it's a start to finish, everything you need, and you would avoid all the pitfalls that I made. Either buying stuff that I didn't need or buying services that I didn't need. It's just cut and paste on how you'll be able to start your own podcast, get it up and running, instead of just wasting 2 to 3 weeks and probably a whole bunch of time and money. It's a way better process. It's straightforward. Boom, you get it, and your podcast will be up way quicker. So until next time, check that out. If that sounds interesting, Matthew Benjamin. Bye.